Welcome to the Convergent Impact Leadership Podcast, where we explore real leadership stories and strategies to inspire meaningful action and purpose. Whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting out, this podcast is here to help you lead with intent, build trust, and strengthen relationships in your organization. I'm Eric Savickas, bringing over 30 years of leadership experience from my time as a U.S. Army officer, university instructor, and currently as a leadership coach working with the fire service. Today, I'm joined by Chief Tim Sendelbach, Fire Chief of the Loveland Fire Rescue Authority in Colorado. Chief Sendelbach brings more than 4 decades of progressive fire service leadership to the role, with a career defined by operational excellence, strategic foresight, and an unwavering commitment to firefighter health and wellness. Nationally recognized as a speaker and thought leader, Chief Sendelbach is presented at leading fire service conferences, including FDIC International and Fire Rescue International, and previously served as editor-in-chief of Firehouse Magazine, shaping conversations on leadership, risk reduction, and culture across the fire service. Under his leadership, LFRA has advanced its wildfire mitigation strategies and prioritized firefighter safety, integrating training, technology, and community engagement. Chief Sendelbach, welcome to the podcast. I am glad to be talking to you today.
Well, thank you, Eric. I appreciate the opportunity.
So and I do this with most guests, let's start at the beginning for you. What first drew you into the fire service as a profession, and how have those early experiences shaped where you are almost 40 years later now?
Yeah, I just actually completed my 40th year, August 15th, or excuse me, 16th, 1985. So thank you for that. I am a second generation firefighter, so I'm following my dad's footsteps. He was a volunteer fire chief in our local department in Wilder, Kentucky. So my experience actually really what engaged me to get into the fire service or enticed me to get into the fire services, not only him, but a specific, I've told this story a few times. The incident was May 28th, 1977, Beverly Hills Supper Club fire. So that fire, I was playing wiffle ball at my parents' house, just below their house on the street with my friends in 1977, if you can imagine. And we seen some smoke off in the horizon, and we started hearing house sirens. And Beverly Hills was well known. That's in Kentucky. It's not in California, but it was well known for having incidents. It was a large nightclub. And basically, we started hearing the sirens. And my dad, I remember very vividly, my dad coming running down the hill to the street we were playing on and jumped into his Chief's car and screamed off. Just assumed there was another fire that he was going to. Long story short, we eventually seen the smoke up on the hill. I go up to the porch, and my mom's up there, and she says, Beverly Hills is on fire. And as she's saying that, she's got a small little black and white TV, 6-inch by 6-inch black and white TV. We were literally watching that fire from my back porch. I could see it on the TV, obviously, and then could see the actual incident. It was less than a mile away from my house. Unfortunately, on that night, 165 people perished, many of which were parents of people I would ultimately go to high school with, friends that I would go to high school with. So that was a very touching moment, and certainly enlightened me as to the fire service and really kind of engaged me from that point forward.
And so you knew back then that this is what I want to do?
I can't say absolutely, but I know one thing that when I went through high school and had those conversations with friends who had lost their parents and so forth, I graduated high school. My parents never thought I would graduate high school, much less go to college, but I went to college specifically for science. So that really, the excitement and intrigue of the fire service got me through higher education. And yeah, I would say I was hooked at that point.
And then did you end up, at least initially, serving in that same area?
Yeah, I started out like my dad as a volunteer. So I volunteered with the Wilder Fire Department for 11 years. Also volunteered with Southgate Fire Department. So come down our hill, you could take a right. 1 mile down the street was Wilder Fire Department. About 2 miles the other way was Southgate Volunteer Fire Department. So I was volunteering for both of them. And then when I went to college, as soon as I came back for summer breaks and such, I continued to volunteer.
So I can imagine that it must have been a bit surreal. I know there's a lot of people in the fire service that end up, once they find the passion for the career, serving in their own community. But for you, especially after relating that story of how that particular fire really made an impact for you, I wonder, did it feel like interesting or surreal that you were there wearing the boots on the ground right in that very same area?
Yeah, I mean, certainly when I joined Southgate Fire Department, which I joined after a couple of years with Wilder, just to try to gain more experience, my first call was literally to Beverly Hills, the
Mm.
property of Beverly Hills. It had been basically demolished well before that, but as we were going up the hill, it was a mattress basically in an open field, but on the Beverly Hills property. I can remember that thought going through my mind of all the images from that night in 1977.
And so you started your career there. You went to school, you said, you got a fire science degree, started your career in that same community. And where since then has your career led you in 40 years?
I gone, I tell people that law hasn't caught up with me yet, but started in Kentucky, got my higher education in Kentucky, left there. My first career opportunity was with Kansas City Fire Department. So I was one of the first, well, I was the first class of firefighter paramedics hired from outside Kansas City. They'd never done that before, so I started my career there, professional career there. Went on to Missouri City, Texas, become the training officer, assistant chief, just in a southwest suburb of Houston. From there to Savannah, Georgia, then on to North Las Vegas, and eventually into the private sector with Firehouse and Fire Rescue magazines.
Any favorite places you've lived?
All of them were unique and all of them were great learning opportunities. I really cherished my time in Savannah. Savannah was incredibly rewarding to me. And certainly here, my 4 years here in Loveland have been outstanding.
So, as the saying goes, the more things change, the more they stay the same. In your 40 years, whether it's in the category of leadership or just a general observation, what stood the test of time for you?
Um, I think humility. I think humility is proven that a humble servant is a much more productive and successful servant. I can recall so many times Alan V. Bernasini, the former chief in Phoenix, saying egos eat brains, and I firmly believe that. I've seen people get into some pretty powerful positions within our profession, and that ego put them in a bad position that they were no longer effective. So I would say humility has lasted the test of time.
I like that. It's definitely a powerful thing and a great attribute to have, being humble. Let's talk about Loveland for a bit. So you mentioned 4 years there as chief so far. As I was reading up on some of the great things Loveland's done recently, you've done a lot of work in taking an approach towards being more proactive for wildfire mitigation. What's your vision in shaping that as part of Loveland's strategy and the wildland interface there?
You know, Eric, it was really by happenstance coming in as the fire chief here. I think any new fire chief does an assessment of the organization, listens to its personnel, and then assesses the organization and the risk that you're responsible for. And while I had been a leader in multiple municipal fire departments, urban, suburban, rural departments, one of the things that was dramatically different here was the wildland risk. I don't have a lot of experience in the wildland arena. So when I seen that, and then historically looking that we played host to the Cameron Peak Fire, which was 208,000 acres, the largest wildland fire in Colorado history. We've had significant floods. There was a tremendous amount of risk that I was assuming a responsibility for. So I wanted to make sure that we put a focus on that. Because what I knew in all of my travels and certainly my interactions as the editor in chief of Firehouse was you don't win a wildfire event when the event occurs. Meaning, once it's ignited, you don't win that event. You try to keep up and you try to basically reduce the amount of damage. Where you win that event is on the front end. So that is the premise of why I wanted to really put emphasis on mitigation, public education, and outreach, because I firmly believe that's the definitive way to beat wildfire. So we did our community wildfire protection plan, identified our risk, prioritized the areas of highest risk. So basically, you took the subjectivity of an overly passionate fire chief out of it, and you said scientifically, here are the areas of concentration and here's the priority order that will address them. So just those things kind of went hand in hand, and it served us incredibly well. I think it served us very well in the test of time. In the fact we had Alexander Mountain Fire was last year. We had 9,668 acres that burned off. No lives lost. Unfortunately, 29 homes were lost. But I think the devastation that we prevented through our forward thinking and our emphasis on wildfire prevention paid dividends that day, or those 17 days, I should say.
And I think certainly you've taken a thoughtful approach to that and probably numerous other things in your department. As I was reflecting on the question, and I used the word vision in there, and listening to your answer, I was reminded that I had a conversation with one of your deputies, Greg Ward, a few months back, and he said, Chief Sendelbach has the longest vision, the most far reaching vision of anybody I know. And I think that's really a testament to what you were saying about being forward looking and thinking through a problem or a situation or a circumstance and how we're going to get us from point A to point B. Do you want to maybe speak to that and what you see as vision?
Well, first of all, I so appreciate Ward's assessment of that. I've never thought that way. I think we all think in a different fashion, and I think my exposure nationally and internationally, and I'll contribute that to my early involvement in the fire service conferences and then eventually through the editor in chief, it's given me a different viewpoint than most. um, the whether it be international viewpoint or just basically north, south, east, west viewpoint. I really think that has paid great dividends for me in developing my career. I know some people that have been successful going down certain paths, and I know some people that have had some horrible careers because they went down other paths. So learning from that and trying to basically focus on that as I develop this organization, kind of lead this organization, that's really what's the driving factor. Many avenues of um, road rash that friends have shared with me, and successes that others have shared with me. So,
So, speaking of some of that national stuff and national perspective, whether that be through numerous instances where you've spoken on the national stage, whether through FDIC or otherwise, or when you were editor chief at Firehouse Magazine, however you define it, what are some of the trends and shifts you've seen nationally in the fire service or emerging right now? And how should do you think departments, whether it be yours or others, start looking to be prepared for those?
the first thing that we have to identify, it's all cyclical, right? It comes full circle. The current generation thinks the next generation is going to screw up the fire service. And I remember coming up as that young booter, people talking about our generation and how they were going to destroy the fire service. We were transitioning from the tail board to full protective ensembles and riding internally. The focus was overly safe. We're right back there. We're looking at a generation that has a different mindset and, more importantly, a different skill set.
Hmm.
And what I've told people is very simply quit looking at that generation with negativity. Embrace them and empower them to basically take that baton and take it to the next level. Where they use technology, we had an absence of technology. Don't frown upon that. Engage it, empower them so your organization can move forward. Our job isn't to be judgmental of them. Our job is to set the stage for them. And I think oftentimes we get concerned that it's not going to look the same, feel the same, and ultimately produce the same. I would say the latter is certainly not true. We will produce the same, if not better, results with the next generation. We've just got to basically give them the history. And remember, our history is not the most glamorous. We've lost 100 firefighters for umpteen years. So certainly passing a baton with some responsibility, saying, don't do what I've done, build upon what I've done and make it better is our responsibility. And I'll just share a quick story. I was taking my parents to the airport this morning. They came out for a weekend visit. And as we're leaving the neighborhood, there were remote lawnmowers, commercial grade lawnmowers, just basically doing the HOA lawn. And
Mhm.
my mother said, "Oh, that's going to take all the jobs away." And I'm like, no, it's not going to take the jobs away. Number one, we're having trouble filling those jobs. Number two, look at how defined those patterns are in using technology. Now we can take that individual who is no longer interested in that type of labor and give them a whole different opportunity to take landscaping, whatever be the case. In our case, the fire service, take it to the next level because we can invest in them in a different fashion than we could focusing on that lawnmower. If that
Yeah.
makes sense. I don't know
No,
if
it
that's
does.
the best example.
I think that's cool. You seem like somebody that's very focused and gets it that people are our business as leaders. How do you find a balance point or stay the ability to stay grounded when you do want to think about the bigger picture and the bigger strategies and longer vision and maybe some other things that are, maybe touch national stuff or regional stuff? There's always conferences. Right? Last week was SDA here in Colorado, and in a couple of weeks we'll be doing the State Chiefs Leadership Conference in Keystone. There's a lot going on as a leader. Just for me, and I'm not in it anymore. But like, I have a plan for the day sometimes, and I have the best intentions of doing great work. And sometimes it's the little things that just get me caught up, and I can't get out from under those sometimes. So, how do you stay balanced between guiding and steering the ship, but making the people in the department feel valued and feel like their day-to-day needs are taken care of?
Well, I think one of the barometers for me is people like Chief War, who is part of our executive staff. He keeps me in check. I can have this vision and I can always be pushing on the accelerator. He's one of two assistant chiefs who just say, "Hey, Chief, every once in a while, we got to tap the brake. We're moving too fast." And I so appreciate that because I have a vision and I know regardless of where you are, your career is a defined period of time. And what you want to do is accomplish everything imaginable. But the reality is you can't accomplish everything. And they're the ones that keep me humble and say, hey, tap the brake a little bit, take a turn here. So I think that's important. But as far as our people, I think kind of keeping that in check is telling your people how much you appreciate them, how honored you are to represent them. I say it time and time again. Every presentation I talk about the LFRA is I pinch myself every morning because I get to be the fire chief of LFRA. It's the easiest story and the easiest people to represent because of the great work they do.
Yeah. And so one part about making people feel valued is related to trust. And that's the theme I'm talking about in October, here in October. I focus, at least in some of the pieces that I've been working on, how leaders earn it, how they may break it, and then keys to rebuilding it. From your perspective, what are the most critical things a leader must do consistently to build and maintain that trust with either their crews or their divisions or whatever element they're leading?
Yeah, I think it's walk the walk. Actions speak louder than words. Um, Acknowledge it. You're not the smartest guy or gal in the room.
Mm.
And I think for many of us, when we receive these bugles, we got five bugles, everybody else has less than us. For some reason, we immediately think we're supposed to have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. But you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to search very hard to find that answer, find the resources that our folks need. And I think, again, that starts with humility, being humble enough. with yourself and confident enough with your skill sets to say, I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I just got to find the person with the right answer to get me the resources that they need.
Or have there been times throughout your career, and I'm sure there have been, but if you could maybe pinpoint something for us where trust was tested, either trust people had in you was tested because of something that you inadvertently did or said, or just the way that you thought you were looking at somebody and that trust was broken for somebody that you had looked up to?
Yeah. So my evolution, I started out a municipal firefighter, going through the ranks in various departments. Then I transitioned into the private sector. My experience with one of the publications, I'll leave it anonymous at this point, in that private sector world, private sector versus public sector is dramatically different. It's red and black in the private sector. It's all about the dollar. And
Mhm.
while I appreciate that, and that created so many lessons for me, there was one that stood out more than any, and that's when we were in a pretty big negotiation for a big change in one of the publications and conferences. Basically, my boss told me this is not about firefighters, it's about making the vendors happy.
Mm.
And that's where there was a powerful lesson learned that his drive was for something totally different than what my drive was. The money is where the focus was on his side of the street. Mine was making this profession safer and more effective and empowering firefighters to do great things. And that day was the day that I made the decision to step away from the magazine businesses. This was not right for me. Because if I didn't, if I focused solely on the money, I felt like I was no longer trustworthy to the firefighters who were really vested in me and making good quality decisions about conferences, publications, and articles that were published.
So it wasn't just the trust that you had in that person that you were working with and a difference in that moment in how they saw the world and how you saw the world, but it was the trust that you felt that the profession that you were representing should have.
Well, I thought the folks on the other end of the line, all firefighters from major cities, they trusted me as being the messenger in chief, the conference director. They trusted me, and I said it was about them. And I said we are going to make this conference about you and improving our profession. When the other side of it was about money. If I would have transitioned to that side, I would have lost all trust and credibility that they had instilled in me.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So let's say something happens and inadvertently somebody loses trust in your department with either you as the top leader or one of the leaders that are above that person or that group of people. What would you say is a good way in your mind to start to rebuild that trust? What are some practical things that you can share to fix some broken trust and get us back on the right track?
I think the first thing is ownership. You got to own it. Admission is the first step to recovery. So you take ownership in whatever may have occurred. And I'm not saying that you admit fault. Maybe you do admit fault, but you have to start that road to recovery by taking ownership and taking responsibility. Let's just say it's one of our firefighters or an officer in our organization made a misstep. I don't need to deny that. We take ownership of it. We're human. And what we're going to do as leaders is we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that mistake does not occur again. Same thing in my situation. If there was a perception of broken trust, I take ownership for that. Hey, I misstated this. Here's the corrective actions that I'm putting in place to ensure that it doesn't happen again. Now, I'm not going to present a uh, a fallacy either. That I could make another misstep. I likely
Mhm.
will make another misstep. And I emphasize the fact that we all make mistakes. Nobody walks in my office or out of my office on rose petals. We're human. And what we're going to do is, in a timely manner, take responsibility and take corrective actions to prevent it in the future.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that goes with that is understanding that it takes time, right? Like it takes time to build that trust initially, and then a very short amount of time, unfortunately, to break that trust, and then even more time to build it up. So as much as we want to say, all right, are we good now? And like move on, right? You got to acknowledge that it's going to take time and it's going to take care and feeding, and maybe it'll never get to where it was before, but we can only hope through the right actions that we can get it there.
Yeah, for sure.
So give me something, Chief, that over your 40-year career, looking back, and it can be recent at Loveland or it can be elsewhere, what's a decision that you made or initiative that you were part of that you're just especially proud of? That if there was a highlight reel at the end of your career, that this thing would definitely be on it?
I think the emphasis on people first, and you've highlighted it in my bio. Health and safety has been a passion of mine, and I think that's a direct result of my experiences losing friends in this profession due to cancer and other tragic events. I take great pride in that, and I think the LFRA has provided me a very unique opportunity to really elevate that and amplify it in this role. So, with our emphasis on health and wellness and drawing a line in the sand and saying, this is the standard we will meet. You fall below that standard, there's a remedial process to get back, but this is the standard. And they've afforded me as the fire chief that I don't have to lower that standard. There are many chiefs that fall to that pressure, and I understand why. Career longevity is something we all aspire for, but our folks understand that when the fire chief says this is a standard, he's not going to compromise. Not only have they held themselves accountable to that, they've held their crew members to it. And to me, that's so important because ultimately, when we hold each other accountable, the service on the street is that much better.
Can you give me an example of a line in the sand for something maybe health and wellness related specifically to your department? I know that a lot of, I mean, certainly there's a high level of awareness for cancer prevention and health and safety in the fire service, but sometimes it feels like, and I'm an outsider, it's sometimes feels like there's only so much we can do, right? And the profession is what it is. But maybe as chief in a department, you can say, no, we're not going to accept that it is what it is. And here is the line in the sand where we're gonna make our stand. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think there's two, both on the health and wellness side, is our medical physicals. So we do medical physicals for all of our personnel every single year, and there's a standard that you must meet. Your VO2 max must be X, Y, and Z, depending on age, gender, and so forth. So if you don't meet that, you don't work another minute, you don't work another hour. You're pulled off the streets immediately. That's a very strong line in the sand. And I take that position from the perspective of my responsibility. I've identified that you haven't met the standard. For me to turn my eye, to turn my head for a minute and allow you to be on the truck or on the apparatus for another call puts us all at risk. So that's a fine line in the sand. At the same time, there is a remedial process to get you back. The last thing I want to do is have our employees, our firefighters thinking, oh my gosh, if I fall below the standard, I'm going to be terminated. That's not the case. You're an investment. You are our most critical investment. What I want to do is invest equally in getting you back, but that takes responsibility on your side too. You have to hold yourself accountable. You have to perform the task that we're asking you to do to get back to that standard. So I think that's critically important. Now, take that to the next step. You're off for a prolonged period of time. There's a return to work process. We don't just put you back on the apparatus. There's a return to work standard that you must meet. And if you don't meet it, there's a remedial process again. And ultimately, could that mean that you lose your job? Yeah. That's black and white. That's straight up the middle. As I tell people, it's a fastball, and I'm revealing the sign. It's number one coming straight up the middle. But as long as you invest, we will invest in you because it's critical for me to get you back to work. More important for me to get you back to work than it is to dismiss you, in my mind.
Has that been And those sound like really great positions to take and long-term health and safety and viability of your membership. But I can imagine, like, if you come in with something like that, that there's a huge ramp up period, or else culturally and maybe with some trust, like we were talking about, people are going to be like, this is wild. Like, we are changing things on a dime here, and we're going to break the organization. Was there some of that when you were putting that into place?
No, and I would say this is where I'm incredibly fortunate. The culture within this organization was well established. I didn't come in here and rattle the culture. I
Okay.
came in here and endorsed the culture and put some parameters in place to further strengthen that culture. So I think that's the advantage that I have. Full transparency is the culture of the LFRA is very forward thinking. They like to test the limits. They like to hold themselves to a high standard.
So, speaking of forward thinking, I think Greg mentioned, are you guys testing out some European style helmets?
No,
No,
no.
no,
I
that
think
was just a rumor.
they did that prior to me getting here. That's interesting you would bring that up because I have a history of talking about European helmets.
Really?
Yeah,
Where do you land on those?
well, I'm not neither pro nor con on the European helmets. One of the things I will say is, as you look at a traditional style helmet behind me, is one thing that we should never do in the fire service as humble public servants with a responsibility of life safety is to grasp onto something as a tradition that impedes our forward progress or compromises the provision of service. Either of those two issues that should be hung on a wall. So I use the traditional helmet and say, if I had the silver bullet of safety, and let's just say it's an accountability with GPS tracking and telemetry capabilities, if it is truly the silver bullet of safety, but it wouldn't fit in that traditional style helmet, would you want it? And a
Hmm.
few hands would go up. But then when I show the next slide and I say, but it'll fit in that European helmet, do you still want it? Every hand goes down. And that's what's so striking to me is that we truly are about this profession and saving lives. There is no tradition that should be so sacred. It is literally about life and death, and that's really what we should focus on, not about how we look. Whatever we wear, we will make cool. I promise you. European traditional saran wrap on our heads, whatever be the case, we can make it look cool.
Yeah, and I promise you, I had no ulterior motive with that question.
Yeah,
I just,
right.
being an outsider, there's interesting conversations that I hear when I visit fire departments. I mean, whether it's helmets or whether or not we should be allowed to wear shorts in the stations or not. Like, there's always hot button issues, but I appreciate your take on that. As we start to wind down here, what's a leadership principle that maybe when you had younger eyes, finishing your fire science degree, starting out in the career, that you held as like, this is a principle that is great and I'm going to carry this with me, but maybe over time, over your career, you shifted and you're like, no, that's not a thing anymore.
You know, I think it's the aggressive mentality. It was always highlighted that, you're aggressive, you're progressive. That's really what leadership's all about. And I spoke a little bit about it in a previous answer, is what I know now, and maybe it's my maturity, is over 40 years, is there's two pedals on the floor. One's a throttle or a gas pedal, one's a brake. And you cannot, nobody, no organization, no community will tolerate full bore 365, 7 days a week. It just doesn't work that way. You've got to know when to hit the accelerator and when to tap the brake. And I think that is so important. You can be an incredibly progressive and successful leader, and every once in a while you're tapping on the brake. There's nothing wrong with that. And a good friend of mine, a college buddy of mine, taught me a powerful lesson. I heard him speak one time, and he said, leadership's about pissing people off at a rate they can absorb. And I think that's a powerful message and truly defines how to be successful. You push, you push, you. Once you meet that resistance, give a momentary pause and then continue to push forward. But you can't constantly be on the accelerator and expect to be successful.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. So one last question for you, Chief, and you've mentioned that you like to move quick, and you've mentioned understanding the accelerator, just like you just did, the accelerator and the brake just now. But you also mentioned that, in your mind, there's only a certain amount of time to get things done, and that's why you do like to move quick. So at 40 years in, what's left? What's left on the agenda?
I think we have so many great opportunities ahead of us, and I really want to create the stability and the future that I sought to when I got here. So I don't see the end immediately down the road. I hope not. I hope I'm afforded the opportunity to conclude my career here. But I do think there's opportunities of financial security, growth, development, and really kind of expanding our wings and looking at the fire service in a little different fashion to include a different delivery model that we may not see currently.
And besides LFRA, any desire to get back on the national stage at all?
Yeah, I think the one thing I wanted to do is make sure that my roots were planted deeply here, that the men and women of LFRA knew that I was their fire chief, and if I was speaking on the road, that was an extra opportunity. I didn't want them to think that that was my focus. I do think telling their story on a national stage is important because they are a hidden gem, not only in northern Colorado, but I think nationally. They've done some great things and well deserved praise and recognition, accolades, but literally eyes looking in to see some of the things that we do here could be successful elsewhere and really change the path of the fire service.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. Well, Chief, thanks so much for joining us today. You clearly have dedication and passion to your people, your department, firefighter safety, readiness, and all the things that go into making you the leader who you are. For our listeners, if you found this episode valuable, please share it with your team or anyone who might benefit from these leadership takeaways. Don't forget to subscribe to the Convergent Impact Leadership Podcast and leave a review on your favorite platform. And for more leadership resources and tools, visit convergentimpact.com. And until next time, lead well, take care of your people, and keep setting the example.